Mary Shelley's novel Frankenstein is written in a form known as the frame narrative, which means that the story she tells is not rendered in one point of view, but in more than one point of view, with the point of views nesting each other. We first have Robert Walton's point of view. He's writing letters to his sister. He is making his way to the Arctic, hoping to discover the secret of the magnet. And in his letters to his sister Margaret, we learn that he comes across a lone traveler making his way by sled across the ice. The man is haggard, near death's door, but he rouses enough to tell Robert Walton his story. This man is, of course, Victor Frankenstein. So then we move into Victor Frankenstein's narrative. So you see, we have two frames, Walton's frame, and then within Walton's frame, we have the frame of Victor Frankenstein. Well, Victor Frankenstein tells of his childhood. He tells of his creation of his creature. He tells of how the creature kills his brother and frames the house servant Justine. And then he tells of how he meets the creature in the mountains of Switzerland. And the creature then tells him his story. So we have yet another narrative. This is a third frame. So we have a frame within a frame. And then, of course, after the creature tells his story, we move out back to Victor's story, and then we move back to Walton's story again. So there's a symmetry there. So the question becomes, what is the rhetoric of the frame narrative? In other words, what effect does this form of storytelling have to take? Well, on the one hand, we can say that in a story as fantastical as this, a story seemingly as unbelievable as this, to hear the tale through more than one voice gives the tale validity. If only the creature told his tale, then we might not believe it because it is quite fantastical. But if Victor tells the tale of a creature, well, that suggests that at least one person believes the tale, and therefore the tale has a bit more validity. But then if a third person who is not really related to either the creature or Victor tells the story, that's a third view that seems to validate the tale as well. So we can say that the frame narrative gives an epistemologically valid grounding to what seems quite dubious when it comes to traditional ways of knowing. In other words, a tale that doesn't seem quite believable, that doesn't seem quite knowable, is made more believable and knowable because of the various frames, each frame giving more validity to the story. But we can also see the frame narrative in the exact opposite way, suggesting that there is always more than one account of any given event. So seen from this view, we can say, well, Walton gives his perspective on the story of Frankenstein, but we know it's only his perspective. And this is the perspective of a man who is very similar to Frankenstein. Like Frankenstein, Walton wants to discover a secret that no one has yet discovered, and he hopes that the secret will shed light into the world, that he will be kind of a savior of the world in discovering the secret of the magnet. So how much can we really trust him? He's very positively disposed toward Victor. And then when we look at Victor's account of his own story, well, we know that Victor has egotistical qualities. And we can only imagine that he would focus on those events in his childhood that would make him look good, make him look brilliant, and ultimately make him look justified for what he's done. And we can also imagine that in his retelling of the story of the creature, he might skew details, again, to make himself look good. Well, even the creature himself, obviously he's telling his story not simply to provide information, but ultimately to persuade Victor to make a female companion for him. So in this regard, we can say that each of the three narrators is not necessarily reliable. So we not only have one unreliable narrator, but three. So who then is the true author of the story? Well, we can say certainly Mary Shelley is, but within the world of the story, it's hard to find an authority that we trust. So what is the role then ultimately of ambiguity in our understanding of the novel? We're faced with frame narrative that suggests two diametrically opposed meanings. The frame narrative giving a kind of validity to a supernatural tale, seemingly supernatural tale, in the frame narrative suggesting that we never can know with any certainty anything in the world, especially a story that seems so supernatural. So we might ask ourselves this question: what is Victor Frankenstein's dilemma in the story? Well, he hates ambiguity. He hates a world that he can't figure out. He hates a world that undercuts his sense of control. And what ultimately undercuts his sense of control? Death. So what will he do? He will try to eradicate death. He will try to eradicate any force that will undercut his surety and certainty. So he hates ambiguity, and this is part of his problem. So for Mary Shelley to write a novel that ultimately, in terms of its narrative structure, is irreducibly ambiguous, well, certainly that's significant. And in some ways, it puts the reader in the same place as Victor, and we ourselves can make choices as to how we will negotiate the ambiguity. Will we try to find a cogent, valid reading of the story once and for all, or will we be open to various semantic possibilities?